The thing is, I did not think I was insulting his parents. I thought I was naming a problem before it became my future. 2 old coats, 1 scratched car key, and of course everyone expected me to pretend poverty was charming. I told Daniel his poor family did not belong at our table. By dessert, his mother placed the house keys beside his plate and told him to choose better. My name is Marlo Calder. I am 31, and I worked as a luxury interior consultant for people who wanted their homes to prove they had climbed higher than everyone who remembered them before. The thing is, I knew how rooms judged people before people admitted they were judging. 2 fabric books, 1 brass lamp, and of course I believed standards were just another form of self-respect. The showroom smelled like new leather, polished wood, and expensive candles that never burned evenly. I stood beside a walnut dining table running my hand over the edge while Callahan checked the chair backs, like comfort mattered more than impression. My husband always did that. He tested weight, hinges, seams, quiet, practical things. I looked at how the room would photograph. He asked if I liked the table for the townhouse. I said it had the right tone. Clean. Serious. A table that told guests what level of life they had entered. Callahan smiled softly and said his mother would say a good table was the one people wanted to stay at. I almost smiled too. Almost. Years before, when my first apartment still had a leaking window and a mattress on the floor, Callahan helped me move without once joking about my cheap boxes. I had written luxury brand names on them with marker because I hated seeing plain cardboard stacked around my life. He carried every box down 3 flights of stairs and said the labels made the place look curated. Back then, that felt like love. Later that evening, his mother Juniper came to the townhouse with food in old plastic containers. Lentils, rice, roasted chicken, wrapped carefully in foil. Hollis waited by the door in a worn brown jacket, holding a paper bag with bread inside. The food smelled warm and kind. The containers looked wrong against the marble counter. I moved them into the pantry before my co-worker Lark arrived. Callahan saw me do it. He asked softly why I treated his mother's kindness like a design mistake. What he meant was simple. What I heard was that I should lower my standards to make his family comfortable. I told him his parents were sweet, but some details did not fit the life we were building. Callahan looked at the closed pantry door. He said they were his life too. My phone buzzed before I had to answer. Briar had written that marrying a man meant marrying his family's level, whether people admitted it or not. I turned the screen down too late. The coffee bar near the showroom had pale stone counters and small plants nobody remembered to water. The thing is, places like that made judgment feel clean. Nobody said poor. They said simple, practical, down-to-earth, not our tone. 1 oat latte, 2 gold spoons. No real cruelty if the words were chosen well. Briar Dane sat across from me in a cream blazer, scrolling through photos from my townhouse mood board. She had been divorced for 11 months and had turned, leaving her husband, into a personal brand. She told people she had outgrown a small life. She said it often enough that I stopped asking whether she believed it. She asked if Callahan's parents had seen the dining room yet. I told her Juniper had brought food again, in containers from another decade. Briar made a small face and said, poor in-laws always started with food, then moved into opinions, then asked for money without using the word. I said they were not like that. Briar asked how I knew. That was the part I hated. I did not know. Callahan never spoke about their money, their work, or what they had. He said his father handled supply contracts and property maintenance. His mother helped with accounts. He said it like people said the weather was mild. Nothing polished. Nothing impressive. Briar said some families were sweet but visually wrong. That phrase stayed with me because it sounded like design, not contempt. At home, I opened the pantry and looked at Juniper's containers again. The lids were mismatched. One had a faded blue sticker on the side. They sat beside my glass storage jars and looked like a mistake in a finished room. I threw away the foil first. Then I moved the containers to the lowest shelf. That night, Callahan found me checking the wedding table mock-ups on my laptop. He stood behind my chair and asked why his parents were seated at the far side of the room in my draft. I said they would be more comfortable there. He asked if comfortable meant hidden. I told him not to turn a seating chart into a moral trial. Of course, that was what he did when he had no better argument. He made tone into injury and injury into proof. 2 place cards. 1 screen. A silence too neat to touch. The first family dinner after that was at a modest restaurant Juniper liked. Not dirty. Not bad. Just too bright. Too loud, with laminated menus and a heater that clicked under the window. The table had paper napkins folded into metal holders. I kept looking at them. Juniper wore plain black flats. Hollis had the same brown jacket. Winslet, Callahan's older sister, arrived last and kissed her mother's cheek before sitting across from me. She had the kind of eyes that did not rush to speak because they were busy collecting. Juniper asked about wedding plans. She said she would love to help with food if we needed family dishes for the rehearsal dinner. I smiled. I said the wedding had a certain tone. I said homemade food was beautiful in the right setting, but not everything belonged in a formal event. Hollis lowered his eyes to his plate. Juniper's hand stopped near her glass, fingers resting around the stem. Winslet looked at me then. Not angry yet. Just still. Callahan said his mother's food had belonged in every hard week of his life. I told him nobody was attacking her cooking. What I meant was that he was embarrassing me by making it emotional. What he heard, maybe, was that I had already decided his mother's love was a cheap detail. During dessert, Hollis asked me how my work was going. I told him about a client who needed me to fix a dining room because her husband kept buying things that made the house look smaller. Hollis smiled and said some people built good homes slowly. I said slow was sometimes just another word for limited. Winslet put her spoon down. The sound was small, metal against ceramic. Still, it cut through the table better than any speech. When we got into Callahan's car, he did not start the engine right away. He asked why I had made his mother feel small over food and his father feel small over money in the same dinner. Specific. Calm. One named wound after another. I told him he was too sensitive because poverty made his family defensive. The word poverty came out before I dressed it better. Callahan's hand stayed on the steering wheel. He said I did not know what his parents had given him. I heard another excuse. I told him love did not require me to pretend bad taste was noble. He drove home without turning on music. Later that night, he called Juniper from the balcony. I could not hear every word, only his low voice and then a long pause. In the kitchen, my phone lit with Briar asking whether the poor family dinner had survived my standards. I did not answer right away. For the first time, the joke looked less elegant on the screen. Then I typed that it had survived. Barely. Across town, Juniper told Callahan they should continue the test until the final dinner. I did not know that, of course. I thought they were wounded people protecting their pride. I thought Callahan's family had decided to dislike me because I had refused to romanticize struggle. That was the clean version I kept close. It made me sound careful, not cruel. The next morning, Juniper sent a message thanking me for dinner and saying she hoped we could all understand each other better soon. I read it twice while standing beside the marble island. The word understand looked soft enough to be harmless. I did not reply for 4 hours. When I did, I wrote that we all wanted what was best for Callahan. It sounded polite. It also meant I had already placed myself above them. The wedding planning office had velvet chairs, glass water bottles, and a wall of invitation samples arranged by price without saying price. The thing is, that was how good design worked. It placed people before they knew they had been placed. 3 paper samples, 1 planner smile, and of course everyone pretended tone was not about class. Callahan sat beside me with a folder in his lap. He had printed vendor notes because he trusted paper. I had a tablet open with the seating plan, colour board, and a list of family responsibilities. The planner asked whether Callahan's parents wanted to help with any visible part of the reception. I answered before Callahan did. I said his parents preferred simple things and might feel more comfortable away from formal tasks. I said perhaps they could greet relatives or handle something behind the scenes. The planner's pen stopped for half a second. Callahan turned toward me and said his parents were not guests to hide. I smiled because rooms like that punish open conflict. I said I only meant they should not feel pushed into spaces where they might feel out of place. What I meant was that I was protecting the picture. What Callahan heard was that I had already edited his parents out of it. After the appointment, he asked why I had made that decision in front of a stranger. His voice stayed quiet. He said I had turned his parents into a problem to manage. I told him I was managing the event because nobody else had the eye for it. He asked if my eye had room for his family. I said his family had room if they understood the tone. The next dinner happened 2 weeks later at another small restaurant, this one with dark wood tables and a framed picture of a fishing boat near the kitchen. Juniper chose it because Hollis liked the lamb. I noticed the brass keyring clipped to her bag when she placed it beside her chair. It was old, heavy, and scratched around the edges. I thought it looked like something from a storage room. Briar was not there, but her messages were. She sent one during the appetizers, asking if I had set boundaries yet. She wrote that poor families mistook closeness for entitlement. That sentence came to the table with me. Hollis asked about our townhouse. He said houses took time to become homes. I said ours was close now that the cheaper pieces had been replaced. Juniper smiled politely and asked which pieces. I said I meant the temporary ones. Then, because silence pressed too hard, I added that some objects brought the wrong energy into a room. Winslet looked at Callahan. Callahan looked at me. I told them about a client who ruined a beautiful space by filling it with old things that had meaning only to her. I said sentiment could become clutter if people were not careful. Juniper touched the brass keyring on her bag. Her fingers closed around it once, then let go. Hollis asked Callahan if he was happy. Callahan did not answer quickly. That pause bothered me more than any answer could have. Winslet said I talked about poverty like it was contagious. The table went quiet. A server passed with plates and looked away at the wrong time, which made the silence feel witnessed. I laughed once. I said everyone was turning a design comment into a moral trial. I said I spent my life helping people understand how rooms worked, and sometimes a family had to think about presentation if they wanted to move upward. Juniper folded her napkin carefully. Not fast, not angry. Edge to edge, corner to corner, until the cloth became a small square beside her plate. That was the moment that almost opened something. For 1 second, she did not look poor to me. She looked patient, not ashamed, not intimidated, measuring. Her plain shoes, her old keyring, the soft lines near her eyes, all of it seemed chosen rather than suffered. There was a clean space in the room where I could have asked myself why a woman who had been insulted did not seem smaller. The answer came near enough to touch. I closed the door before it entered. Poor people often hid judgment behind dignity. That was all. Dignity was free, so of course people used it when they had nothing else. Outside the restaurant, Callahan asked me not to speak about his parents like that again. He did not raise his voice. He stood beside the passenger door with the city light on one side of his face and asked like a man still trying to leave me a way back. I heard him choosing them over me. I said he needed to decide whether he wanted a future with me or a lifetime defending his parents' feelings. He said those were not different futures to him. Winslet came out before I could answer. She helped Juniper with her coat, though Juniper did not need help. Hollis gave Callahan one look, the kind fathers give sons when words would only embarrass them. Nobody hugged me goodbye that night. On the drive home, Callahan kept one hand on the wheel and the other near his phone, as if waiting for a message. I stared out the window and told myself the family had shown me exactly why boundaries mattered. The next morning, Winslet told Callahan the final dinner should happen before invitations went out. Before that final dinner, though, there were smaller tests I did not recognize as tests. Juniper asked if I wanted to come with her to choose fabric for a chair she was repairing. I said I was too busy with real client work. Hollis offered to help Callahan install shelves in the townhouse garage, and I said we had already chosen built-ins because open shelves looked unfinished. Winslet invited me to coffee and said she wanted to understand what kind of family I thought I was marrying into. I told her, with a laugh, that I hoped it was one that knew when to give a couple the space. Each answer sounded reasonable when it left my mouth. Each one landed somewhere I could not see. Callahan became quieter after that. Not colder exactly, less available. He still brought my dry cleaning in. He still asked about my meetings. He still slept beside me. But something had moved behind his face and I could not arrange it back into place. I told myself he was sulking because his family had trained him to mistake boundaries for rejection. That explanation looked good enough to keep. The townhouse dining room smelled like beeswax polish and the expensive fig candles I bought because they made the air feel richer. I had chosen linen napkins, narrow glasses, and plates with a thin black rim. The thing is, a proper table can teach people how to behave. 2 candlesticks, 1 seating plan, no reason to call it cruel. Callahan stood in the doorway while I moved the flowers 3 inches to the left. He asked why dinner with family had to look like an audition. I told him it was not an audition. It was a chance for everyone to rise to the room. He said that was the same thing in better clothes. I ignored that because it sounded like one of his quiet little sentences that expected to be carried around all day. The fake compromise had been my idea. I told Callahan I could help his parents, not change them exactly, just guide them. I could explain what to wear for formal events, which stories to avoid, how to answer questions from my clients and family without making everything sound small. Callahan asked if I heard myself. I said I heard myself trying. He stood beside the table and named the pattern. He said I mocked their clothes, their food, their car, their manners, their silence, and now their future place in our wedding. He said it was not one dinner. It was a room I kept building around them, one where every chair was too low. I told him he had never once admitted they embarrassed him too. He looked tired then. Not angry. Just tired in a way I had not seen before because I was usually too busy arranging the room around his face. He said he was proud of them. He said they built their life without asking anyone to clap. He said his mother had cleaned offices before sunrise when he was a child, then learned accounts at night. He said his father wore old jackets because he hated waste, not because he needed my approval. What he meant was that their history was not mine to decorate. What I heard was poverty pride. I told him pride did not pay for polish. He looked down at the table. His hand rested on the back of the chair Juniper would use. He did not pull it out. He only touched it once, then stepped away. That evening he went to Winsley's house. I knew because he texted that he would be late, and then stopped answering for 3 hours. Winsley's kitchen, I later learned, had yellow light and a cracked tile near the stove. She told him I had failed more than enough already. She said the test had done its work. Callahan told her he still wanted me to pass because he loved me. That detail should have made me softer when I heard it later. It did not. It made me feel watched from a room I had never entered. While Callahan was there, I went to my mother's apartment. Sunday. Calder lived in a neat 2-bedroom with old floral curtains she refused to replace because they still worked. She made tea and listened while I explained that Callahan was too attached to his poor parents, that marriage required separation, that a wife could not be expected to carry a family's low standards forever. My mother looked at me for a long time. She had spent years being called the cheap woman who married up. My stepfather's family had made sure she never forgot the price tag they put on her. That was the wound I had inherited, even when I called it taste. She told me humiliation did not become class because the table was expensive. I said she was speaking from old shame. Her face closed and she carried her teacup to the sink, though it was still half full. 2 women, 1 kitchen, the wrong kind of mirror. Back at the townhouse, Callahan sat at the dining table with his laptop open. He told me he had paused some wedding decisions, vendor access, menu approvals, invitations. He said he needed time before moving forward. I saw the screen. My name had been removed from the shared vendor folder. He did not announce it like punishment. He simply turned the laptop so I could see. That was his silent decision marker, though I called it temporary anger. Of course I did. Men who avoided conflict often performed control through small administrative moves. That was how I explained it to myself. I told him pausing vendors would make us look unstable. He said looking stable had stopped being his first concern. The next morning, Juniper called. Callahan put the phone on speaker because he said the invitation was for both of us. His mother asked us to host one final dinner at the townhouse. She said she wanted my mother there too, and Winslet and Hollis. Her voice sounded warm. Too warm for a woman I had insulted. I asked what the dinner was for. Juniper said family. The word did not fit the room I had built. After the call, I walked through the townhouse and touched the things I had chosen. The black-rimmed plates in the cabinet, the pail runner folded in the sideboard, the brass bowl near the door where I kept keys, though Callahan was the one who always knew where things actually were. I had spent months making that house look like proof. Proof that I had moved past the cheap apartment. Proof that I had not become my mother. Proof that no one would ever look at me and see a woman who had married up by luck. Callahan found me by the front window and asked what I was thinking. I told him I was thinking his family had made every step harder than it needed to be. He said maybe I had mistaken their patience for permission. That sentence stayed in the room after he left it. I called Briar and told her Juniper wanted one final dinner. Briar said it sounded like a trap, but not the dangerous kind. She said poor families loved emotional ambushes because they did not have cleaner tools. I laughed because I needed the old rhythm back. Briar laughed too, but she ended the call faster than usual. That was the first time her support sounded like distance-wearing perfume. The final dinner began before anyone arrived. The thing is, a table can make an argument before the first glass is filled. I used the good plates, the linen napkins, the imported wine, the brass candlesticks, and the heavy flatware that made the hand understand money. 6 chairs, 1 table, no excuse for anyone to miss the difference. Sunday arrived first, wearing a navy dress and the tight expression she used when she wanted to warn me but had already learned I would not listen. She said the table looked beautiful. I told her beauty was the point. Briar had promised to be available by text. She said she wished she could see the poor family finale, then added a laughing face. I told myself she meant support. Even then, something about her message felt careful, like she wanted the story but not the stain. Callahan came downstairs in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled once. He looked at the table, then at me. He asked me to be kind tonight. I said I had been kind long enough. His eyes moved to the front door before the bell rang. Juniper and Hollis arrived simply dressed again. Hollis carried a modest paper bag with homemade dessert. Juniper wore a grey coat and carried the same old handbag with the brass keyring clipped inside the strap. Winslet came behind them, calm and unsmiling. My face moved before I told it not to. Callahan saw it. Winslet saw it. Juniper probably did too, but she only took off her coat and thanked me for hosting. The townhouse smelled like roasted lamb, fig candles, and the lemon cleaner I had used on the marble before dinner. Juniper complimented the house while I poured wine. She said it was becoming warm. I said it was finally starting to look like a place with standards. Hollis placed the paper bag on the sideboard. He said a house was only good if people felt welcome inside it. I laughed softly. I said not everyone belonged in every house. Sunday looked down at her plate. Winslet stopped cutting her food. Callahan said my name, quietly. Not as a warning exactly. More like the last hand on a closing door. I kept going because the room had become too still. Still rooms make me want to correct something. I said Callahan had a future now. A real one. A home, clients, a circle, children one day who would need to know how to stand in better rooms. I said poor families sometimes loved their children by holding them down with guilt and old habits. Juniper placed her fork beside her plate. Callahan told me this was my chance to stop. That sentence did something sharp in me, not because it was loud. because it sounded like he knew the ending before I did. I crossed the line then, not by accident, not because wine made me loose. I chose it with my eyes open. I told Callahan his poor parents did not belong at our table. Nobody moved. The candle between Hollis and Sunday flickered once and the flame bent toward the window. I said they hurt his image. I said their clothes, their car, their food, their manners, all of it made him look like a man who never escaped. I said he needed to ask them to leave and then slowly remove them from our life before they poisoned our future children with small thinking. Juniper looked at Callahan, not at me. That should have stopped me. It did not. I told him he had to choose the family he came from or the family we were building. I said he could not drag old poverty into every room and expect me to call it love. Callahan's face did not change much. His hand rested on the table, palm down near his knife. He did not reach for me. Then I said the one thing that was true. I told him he had hidden too much about his family. He had made me walk blind into a room full of secret judgment. He had let me speak without knowing what game everyone else was playing. He could not deny it. Callahan said he had hidden the money because he needed to know whether I respected people without it. Money. The word arrived too quietly for its size. At first, I thought he meant savings. A small account. Maybe help with the townhouse deposit. Something embarrassing in the other direction. I almost softened because money could be managed if it was useful. Juniper asked Hollis for the envelope. I looked at my phone under the table and texted Briar. Once. Then again. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and did not return. No answer. The space where her reply should have been felt louder than Winslet's silence. Hollis reached into his jacket and took out a cream envelope. He did not look dramatic. That almost offended me. A man carrying power should look like power. Hollis still looked like a man who would fix a loose chair before sitting on it. He slid the envelope to Juniper without a word. Juniper opened it slowly. Paper against paper. A clean sound in a room that had stopped breathing normally. Callahan closed his eyes for 1 second. Winslet looked at me as if the answer had been written on my face since the first dinner. Juniper placed the first document beside Callahan's plate, then set the brass keyring on top of it. She told Callahan the house was his. For a second, I only saw the keyring. Old brass. Scratched edges. The same ugly little object I had dismissed in restaurants and entryways. It had been beside Juniper every time I tried to make her smaller. It had sat near plates, bags, folded napkins, and now it sat on top of the house I had been calling ours. My mouth opened before my thoughts arrived. I asked what she meant by his. Juniper said the townhouse had been bought through the Bellamy family company months before I moved in. It had never been a gift to me. It had been prepared for Callahan, and maybe for his wife, if that wife showed she understood the family she was entering. The room gave me no place to put my hands. Hollis said their business owned supply contracts, warehouses and rental properties across 3 counties. He said it like someone explaining a grocery list. Winslet added that they had watched me treat their old car, simple clothes, and quiet manners as proof that they were beneath me. I looked at Callahan. He did not look triumphant. That made it worse. I wanted him to look pleased. I wanted a villain. I wanted someone to blame for making me perform cruelty in a room where cruelty had become evidence. Instead, he looked like a man who had hoped until the last possible second. The document on the table was a property transfer deed, signed through the Bellamy family company and prepared for Callahan alone. Juniper said the townhouse had been purchased before I moved in, held by their business, and meant as a wedding gift once the family knew the woman beside their son understood what family meant. The cream paper lay flat under the brass keyring. I kept looking at the old scratches around the metal loop. Hollis said their small business-owned supply contracts, warehouses and rental properties. He said it without pride. That made it harder to answer. Winslet added that every insult had been heard, remembered and forgiven once, but not forever. I reached for my wine glass and moved it half an inch, though I had no reason to move it. Sunday sat beside me with both hands in her lap. She did not defend me. I said I had been joking. I said I wanted Callahan to have high standards. I said I never meant to hurt anyone. The words came out softer than the ones before them, a cheaper fabric after the expensive one tore. Then I thanked Juniper for the house. That was the worst part. I heard myself do it. The gratitude arrived too fast, too bright, as if the keys had anything to do with me. Juniper looked at Callahan and told him a wife should protect his heart, not train him to be ashamed of it. Hollis said their son should find a woman with manners before he found a mother for his future children. Callahan removed my hand from his sleeve. Not roughly, just clearly. He told me to leave the house tonight. Briar texted later that she did not want to be dragged into family money drama. She said I had misunderstood her jokes. I moved back into Sunday's apartment, into the guest room with the floral curtains I used to mock. The wedding vendors stopped answering me after Callahan paused the wedding and removed my access. Sunday stopped letting me call the Bellamys those people. Briar sent one careful message and then became busy every time I called. At work, I still advised clients on rooms, but I stopped using the phrase family table. The thing is, I thought standards protected me from becoming the poor woman at someone else's dinner. Of course, I called it taste when I weighed people by shoes, cars, containers, and coats. What it cost me was not a house. It was the family that tested me before trusting me, and I failed while sitting at their table. The brass keyring stayed beside Callahan's plate. I wanted a better room, and they showed me the door.